felt like tea fit the mood or something. I don't think anyone would call me an advocate for DNFs, but I'm definitely not against one every once in a while, and this year I hit 6 that I can remember. Some I do mark on my Goodreads if I have been reading for a while, but a lot of them I just have to remember from the scrounges of my own mind what actually happened and in those abysses and why I didn't want to read them and stuff. So I have 6 that I can remember. There's probably more, but the major one and the one that I've talked about all year that has disappointed me a lot has been Queenie, and I was so sad by this. This is by Candace Carthy Williams, and I not only heard great things about it as a kind of auto-fiction, literary fiction about a woman who was in London, and I was even more excited after I read an essay by her in the collection Gurl, 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 and it was so good, and it talked about how she was afraid of being too personally connected with Queenie as a character, that she changed her hair, she changed her way, and that everyone didn't want to talk about her writing, but who she was and if she was Queenie and if this was like Queenie. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. I love kind of this crux in this conversation around death of the author and how we talk about our authors and things like that. I find that super interesting. And then I started this book, and it begins with a miscarriage. And this was something that I had not heard talked about at all. There's a whole discussion around content warnings, and when I am pro content warnings, you can skip them if you want. I do understand that they're not in every book. On the other hand, I was really surprised because I had heard a lot of people talk about it, and miscarriage was never mentioned. I'd heard conversations about sex, I had conversations about race and womanhood and being a Black woman, and had that whole discussion without anyone talking about a miscarriage that graphically happened in the first paragraph of the page. And I was like, how did this not happen? I definitely have some frustration because miscarriage is not something that is often given as a trigger warning, even though it appears in a lot of books. And it is something that's incredibly sensitive to me, and it put me kind of in a bad mood going into the novel. Like, if I had have been aware of it, I think I would have been able to prepare for it. I was kind of already in a bad mood when I was beginning it, just because I was like off-put and triggered and all of those things. And then we get to these scenes where this older man is kind of harassing her and following her and making her drive home with her. And then there is this fairly aggressive sexual scene where you've already got the idea that she's not super consenting to this and she's kind of punishing herself. And I was like, I'm good. At this point, I was over 20% in, and I was like, I cannot take this anymore. I can trust that Carthy Williams will probably go on and have a nuanced depiction and conversation around these issues and really deal with them well, and also not want to take that journey with her. What I didn't say in the very short introduction is I would love for you to tell me which book of these would you like me to pick up, because I'm not against restarting or finishing any of these books. This is one where I think I could enjoy it now. It's been like 6-7 months. Then we're going to move on to very similar conversations. This is Burnt Sugar by Avni Dosni, and it has been very, very controversial. And this is one where I don't think it's a book for me. I should have known, like, from the first paragraph. It's like, she had some time as a beggar, but she was supported by her rich parents. And the very famous first line that I will paraphrase probably badly is, I would be lying if I never said that my mother's pain gave me joy. And that's just not the kind of vibe I have. Like, I really love following flawed characters, but I need to have some kind of hope in humanity or joy or wanting to see better, even if it's not really completely there. And that's a character where I just couldn't really do it. It had a lot of descriptions around bodily fluids and stuff like that that just really I don't like. And I would rather not read this book. It is very short. I think I finished like 40% of it, and I was like, no, I'm good. We're going to talk about A Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man. I always want to say that backwards. This is by James Joyce, who is famous for being very confusing and very convoluted and liking facts. And I think that's mostly stuck in Ulysses. I don't know if this is not one of his harder works. I didn't find it hard. I found it boring. One of the things that I realized in 2021 is I really love coming of age. I really love boring books when they're written by women. I have a hard time reading boring books that are very stuck in the minds of men. I just don't really want to hang out in a dude's mind for very long, I find. And I found that this one was just a book that I wasn't super interested in. It's not a very long book. I might re-go back to it at one point in the future. You know, if I read something else by James Joyce, How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House. And this is a book that I was super excited for. It is set in Barbados and has this kind of mystery story about the island and about these people and about people from various kinds. And I was just a little confused and also in my reading slump, and just I couldn't get into it. I didn't know who all the characters were. And again, I may revisit At the moment, I was like, I just need to DNF this and I'm stop stressing about reading a book that I really don't want to pick up at this moment. And then we have View from Castle Rock, and this is by Alice Munro. She is a famous Canadian author and short storyist. I've written Runaway, which won the Pulitzer Prize. One of the ways that it is characterized is by Southern Ontario Gothic, which is kind of like Southern Gothic, but in Ontario, which is the area that I live in. And they're like, it's not really that different from historical fiction or from contemporary, wherever it's set. It's just a little bit eerie, and you have the little bit of the unbearingness, but nothing actually horror or supernatural happens. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed looking at the tension beneath the things. This, however, is a collection that is a little bit different, set in 1700s and partly based on family history and partly based on fiction, and its combination, and it was just unbearably slow. I read 34% of this collection and several short stories, and I just wasn't into it. It had several slurs and had not great depictions of Indigenous people, and it's a very quite old book by a very old author set very long ago, and I was like, I just don't think I need this book in my life. And then last and most disappointingly, since Queenie, we have The People We Meet on Vacation. And this one I was super excited. It's by Emily Henry, the same author of Beach Read, which I had been looking forward for quite a while and had read and enjoyed. I didn't absolutely love it, and it's faded a little bit more than the other romances, like the Brown Sisters and Talia Herbert, and like those ones have stuck with me a lot more, but I did really enjoy it. And I was excited to pick this up, and I just wasn't into it. It started off a little bit slow, and I was like, okay, that's fine. And then we get to the part where she meets up with her best friend and they just start trashing the internet and it's all fakeness. And if you've been here a while, you know that I have feelings about people just ranting on about the fakeness of the internet. I think a great metaphor for the way that I feel about social media is the way that I feel about people talking about women and makeup and other people who wear makeup. It's just the idea that women wear makeup in order to appeal to men, in order to be seen as beautiful, and that, you know, you're more beautiful when you don't wear makeup, or like, you know, what makes you beautiful is that you don't know you're beautiful, and all of those things. And it's like, no, I can want to wear makeup. The point that I was trying to illustrate here is the context about makeup and women is that the idea that women cannot exist apart from man's gaze. That if a woman wears makeup, it must be for the desire of a man's attention. And when a woman chooses to not dress in that way, she's also doing it to avoid a man's gaze. And both are ridiculous and absurd, and both of them are letting the man, or the men in general, dictate the way that she chooses to interact with the world. It frustrates me so much that the conversation around makeup, whether she wears makeup or doesn't wear makeup, whether she dresses revealingly or modestly, is only for the sake of a man, because she is either doing it to appeal to men or she is doing it to distance herself from men. I love Most Girls by Haley Steinfeld because, like, yeah, most girls are all of these things. You avoid a context where a woman or a girl, or I'm talking in very gendered language, but you understand what I'm talking about, that we cannot exist without the lens of a man, that our actions can only be through that. And I feel like that's how we talk about the internet too. We talk about the internet as if someone cannot interact with the internet without the gaze of the other, without the gaze of fame, without the gaze of attention. We do not entertain the thought that a person, especially a woman, could interact with society, could interact with social media in a way that had nothing to do with attention, that had nothing to do with likes, that had nothing to do with comparison or popularity. Maybe I'm an outlier, but like, I only care about attention so much as it creates conversations. I will fully acknowledge that I know I watch my videos probably more than anyone else watches my videos because I enjoy them. They're a self-record, they're a diary, and obviously I edit what I say because I don't want to reveal all my secrets to people. But I love going back and having 5 years of records on my life, and I hate that I have to consider how people are going to consider that all the time, because there's an idea that if I choose to be a YouTuber, if I choose to put my life on the internet, it must mean that I'm incredibly low on self-worth, or that the people who are on the internet are fake or attention-seeking, or that people, and I know that I haven't received a large amount of fame or a large amount of attention, so I can't understand the way that parasocial relationships, I've had parasocial relationships that I have not enjoyed, mostly from men who have chosen to comment on my appearance no matter what I am wearing in the video. And I know that choosing to dress well in front of a camera will make me more good to the algorithm. And yes, I want to be good to the algorithm because I want to have conversations, not because I need it to validate me. And I think that that's the conversation. Like, I've been here for 5 years and I've loved it. My self-confidence has grown so much in my rest of the world because I've had lots of practice in talking about the things that I love, talking about the things that I adore, that I'm able to articulate myself so much better. And I'm so grateful for that. This conversation probably frustrates me because it so closely relates to the idea of what I was talking about. The idea that I can never be free from the lens of men. I can never be free from the way that they are going to enforce the fact that my actions have to be as a result of them. And it drives me insane that I can never be free from these constant barrage of opinions about what women's actions mean. It's annoying and frustrating, probably way off context and not what Emily Henry was talking about, but it hit a nerve, and this is the nerve it hit. Posting pictures of myself should not be seen as a thing that's attention grabbing or performative or any of those things, and I think that it nags myself that grew up in a culture that always said that women have to be really conscious and that we always have to take the extra step to make sure that men aren't, looking at our bodies, and that like women are sluts or they're whores or they're just insecure or all of those things just because they're posting or just because they're wearing makeup or wearing clothes that like look good on them. And I think that that's the frustration, that's the root of the trauma, because I think that in my mind it's like, can we not just look beautiful? Can we not just post about our lives? Can we not just post things without being seen as something that is a performance? Can it just be something that's innocent or, honestly not about you? And that is my very opinionated rant about the internet and why I think I get really annoyed whenever things about performativeness and all of those get so talked about, especially when it comes to women. And we end this year, I just want people to remind and to look at someone and be like, maybe they have good intentions. And I have good intentions about all these books and I did not end up liking them, or maybe I'll return to them so I can have better intentions. That's what we really need. Have a great day. Tell me about the books that made you want to yell or that made you just want to quit, because that is an accepted practice here. We'll get our tea, we'll drink things, we'll be happy, and it'll be great. I think I'm going to do books that I hated the most next because, we're on a roll. Where are the women that stretch between Gothel and Rose, Venus and Hera, Athena and Aphrodite? Where are the women of ordinary lives, the housewife, the athlete, the teacher, the scholar, artist, the tech worker? We need to humanize the angel and write of those ladies of the night, but let us not forget that women are women are women. We exist. Let us just exist. That is how I feel almost always about being a woman. Just let me exist, man.